Have you ever thought about the economy like a car? Sometimes it's flying down the highway, and other times it's completely stalled on the side of the road. Well, if the economy is a car, then the government often has its hands on the wheel. And today we're looking at one of the most powerful tools it has, government spending. It's both the gas pedal and the brake for the entire economic engine. So let's start with a situation we've all seen before. The economy stalls out, right? Businesses are struggling, people are getting nervous about their jobs, and everything just feels like it's grinding to a halt. How on earth do you jumpstart a machine that big? Well, that's exactly the question governments have to answer. And their answer, a lot of the time, lies in something called fiscal policy. Now, that sounds complicated, but it's not. All it really means is that the government is using its financial power, its ability to tax people, and its ability to spend money to try and steer the economy in the right direction. It's their economic toolkit, basically.
And if you open up that toolkit, you'll find a few different instruments. You've got taxes, public debt, the overall budget, but the one we're really going to focus on today is government expenditure. Why? Because it's the most direct tool they have. It's not just tweaking the rules, it's the government actively stepping in and spending money to make something happen.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our first big problem, a sluggish economy. We're talking about a recession. This is when that economic car of ours is sputtering, losing power, and there's a real danger it could just stop altogether if nobody does anything.
So what does a recession actually feel like for people? Well, it's kind of a nasty downward spiral. You see, businesses notice people are buying less, so they start producing less. To do that, they unfortunately need fewer workers, so unemployment starts to climb. And of course, when people lose their jobs, they have less money, so they spend less, which, you guessed it, means businesses sell even less. It's a vicious cycle. So how do you break?
This is where the government steps on the gas. It doesn't just sit back and hope for the best, it actively starts spending money on big projects. We're talking about building new roads, upgrading ports, fixing up the power grid, things that put people to work. But you might be wondering, okay, how does building a highway 100 miles away help my local coffee shop? It seems disconnected, right? But what's really happening is the start of a powerful chain reaction, a ripple effect that can actually lift up the entire economy. Let's break down how that stimulus really works.
All right, so here's how that ripple happens. Step 1. The government spends money on, say, a new bridge. That money immediately goes to hiring construction workers and paying the companies that supplied the steel and concrete. Step 2. All those workers and business owners now have fresh income, and what do? They spend it. They buy groceries, they get their car fixed, maybe they go out for dinner. And that spending creates new demand. So the grocery stores, the auto shops, the restaurants, they all see more business and might even need to hire more people themselves. That's the famous multiplier effect, where that one initial investment creates a much, much bigger wave of economic energy.
And you know, there's another piece to this that's just as important, and it's all about psychology. When business owners see the government investing and they see more customers walking through the door, their confidence gets a huge boost. Suddenly, they're more willing to take a risk, to invest in that new piece of equipment, or to hire that extra person, which adds even more fuel to the recovery.
Okay, but this is the big question, right? If the economy's down and tax revenues are low, where in the world does the government get all this extra money to spend? I mean, the obvious answer might seem to be just raise taxes, but think about it. If you do that during a recession, you're pulling money out of people's pockets, which is the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve. It would be totally self-defeating. So instead, the government runs what's called a deficit. It spends more money than it brings in. And to cover that shortfall, it has two main options. The first one is borrowing, selling government bonds. The big risk here is something called crowding out. If the government borrows too much, it can make it more expensive for private businesses and people to get loans for themselves. The other option is monetization, which is a fancy way of saying the central bank essentially creates new money to pay for the spending. That gets cash into the system fast, but it comes with its own major risk: inflation. All right, so we've seen how government spending can be the gas pedal to get a stalled economy moving. But what about the opposite problem? What happens when the engine isn't stalled? It's redlining, when the economy is just moving way too fast. We're talking about an overheating economy. An overheating economy usually means one thing for you and me: high inflation. And that is a huge problem. It means there's just too much money chasing too few goods, so prices for everything, gas, food, rent, they start to shoot up. All of a sudden, your paycheck just doesn't stretch as far as it did last month, and the value of any money you have saved is just getting eaten away. So what does the government do now? Well,
If extra spending is the gas pedal, then the solution for an overheating economy is to take your foot off the gas. In fact, it's time to gently tap the brakes. And in our analogy, that brake is cutting back on government spending.
The logic here is actually beautiful in its symmetry. The exact same tool you use to speed the economy up, you can also use to slow it down. To fight that rising inflation, the government just does the reverse. It reduces its own spending. It's a deliberate pullback designed to bring the whole system back into balance.
And the way it works is just the multiplier effect in reverse. By cutting spending, maybe by delaying a big construction project or trimming department budgets, the government is actively pulling money out of the economy. This reduces the total demand for goods and services. With less money chasing after the same stuff, the pressure on prices eases up and inflation can start to cool down.
So what we're really looking at is this constant fiscal balancing act. You've got two opposite problems, an economy that's too slow and an economy that's too fast. And for both problems, the government has this one incredibly powerful, flexible tool, its own spending. It's all about trying to keep that economic car moving at a smooth, steady, and sustainable speed.
So let's just boil it all down, right? It's really this simple, at least in theory. When the economy is slowing down in a recession, the government hits the gas by spending more. When the economy is overheating with inflation, it taps the brakes by spending less. Gas pedal, brake pedal.
The logic seems so clean, so straightforward. But that brings us to the real million-dollar question, doesn't it? If the tool itself is this simple, then why is actually balancing a real-world economy so incredibly difficult? What about all the politics, the timing, the unexpected global events that turn this simple theory into one of the biggest and messiest challenges out there? Well, that's something to think about.